Gender-based violence is a serious public health problem, so it is not a private problem of reserve for privacy of the home, but right through affects the entire society. It is not linked to certain economically or educational environment, but occurs in all levels and social contexts. However, it is a social problem, which has been marked both by invisibility and by a constant presence throughout history. Violence against women has its origin in the relationship of subordination of women to men, which has historically marked the coexistence between the two. For many years, it has been an invisible problem for society. Fortunately, at the present, the social perception of this problem is changing, and nowadays women are conceived as an autonomous and independent being. And although gender violence is not a new phenomenon, it is not viewed as a social problem public health. Gender violence is understood to be any violent act or aggression based on a situation of inequality within the framework of a system of relations of domination men that has or many have as a consequence physical, sexual, or psychological harm. In addition, pulling threats of such acts and coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether they occur in the public sphere or in family or personal life. Therefore, the concept gender violence gives name to a problem which, even recently, was part of people's personal lives. It was considered a family matter that should not go beyond the door and therefore should not be intervened.
Discrimination against women and gender violence as the most brutal manifestation of inequalities between men and women is a problem that crosses borders and is present in most of the countries of the world, with the particularity that the experiences about abuse are remarkably similar in all places and cultures. The first and most important thing to remember is that violence is a learned relationship strategy. It is not innate. If this were this case, all people will be violent, or all people will exercise violence in the same way and to the same degree. However, we do not always use it in our relationship. We talk, we negotiate, we agree, we try to understand to the other person's point of view, and finally we reach an agreement even if we do not get the one we originally wanted. So the abusers are selective in the exercise of violence, which shows that they are capable of controlling themselves in any other situations. Regardless of the forms in which the abuse manifests itself, it always seeks the same objective: to erode the woman's self-esteem in order for the aggressor to increase his degree of power and control over her. There are many forms of violence against women. Here are some indications to identify them: physical violence, sexual violence and sexual abuse, sexual harassment, traffic of women and girls of the purpose of exploitation, economic violence. The phenomenon of the gender violence has particular features that differentiate it from other types of violence. This violence is practiced routinely and daily against women, so that it becomes part of their relationships as a couple and can live with them for years. So the abuse is but isolated event, but is prolonged over time. They weaken the physical and physiological defense mechanics, generate fear and feelings of helpless and powerless towards the victim.
We must not forget that abuse is exercised with a man with whom they maintain an affective and loving bond, with whom he shares his life, and who is sometimes the father of his children. So the things over him are very complex and ambivalent. First, it is an issue that since childhood it has been seen that a masculine man has controlled that woman has been learning to be tender, careful, and maternal. This is one to the partners of women. Time violence has affected men in holding back on their feelings and emotions towards themselves and towards others. This is one of those masculinity patterns. As a result of analyzing the problem and its consequence, it becomes clear that this situation has gone from being a personal circumstance tolerated by the majority of society to a public problem present in the collective conscience that needs to be attended to by public service. Although nowadays gender violence is conceptualized as a social problem of great magnitude, which affects all groups. The problems it generates are disseminated from all the media, it is fought by all public powers, and is rejected by society. On the other hand, despite the various information and dissemination campaigns, the role of labeling victims of gender-based violence is still made today, generating a situation of double victimization and creating a erroneous concept about the mistreatment that has to be done. Finally, there is no personal situation that justifies, in any case, gender violence and abuse in general. In the same way, a specific profile of the abuse is not defined, but rather different people who can use different ways to achieve their goals through violence, with only this goal being the dominate and exercise power over men, which is the common denominator in all gender violence relationships. In conclusion, it is evident that the nursing professional, in the exercise of his profession, although he has a fundamental role for detection and possible resolution of the mistreat, as well as in the retention of relatives and friends of the victims. Therefore, it is necessary to work and improve the training of professionals so that their intervention is much more effective, and this achieve a common objective within this area, which is none other than the eradication of gender violence.
Conclusion. In our opinion, gender violence is given by culture. It is more than anything by the values and the upbringing of the parents towards the children or by traumatic situations that they live and are repressed feeling that somehow discourage against the people who, according to his eyes, are weak. The real and regrettable thing are what we totally disagree with is imposing his force with violence, either physical or psychological. Consequently, many families are marked in conclusion. If you live with fear and within an environment of violence, it is a better to first ask to help to protect your physical and psychological integration. Second, protect other people. And third, to ask for physiological help. Finally, to create awareness, gender equality and equity and the importance of respect and tolerance. Gender equality is a very difficult to achieve. However, there are still unacceptable levels of discrimination against. The stark truth is that women remain a very vulnerable group in society. Then, violence against women is a crime, and yet this happens in all countries and at all levels. So many women we afraid to report cases of domestic violence against women goes unreported. We must therefore refuse to accept the continuation of abuse and violence against women. We cannot allow ourselves to be passive, taking into account a woman who suffered persecutions and a kill of injustice. For the sake of our daughters and granddaughters, we cannot just sit back and do nothing.